Hey guys, I'm Nathan from Arms and Armor. Today I want to show you a couple of original rapiers and a rapier that I just finished making so that we can think about what are the characteristics of a high-end rapier and how are they different from a lower-end modern piece. Stay tuned. So I have here two rapiers. One is an original from the early 17th century. The other is our German rapier. It's one that I've just finished making. Now, these are different types of rapiers, but I want to use them to illustrate a few points, right? Recently, at a few events I've been to, people have been kind of bringing me their training rapiers and saying, oh, look at this one, look at this one, look at this one that somebody made. And my response is usually, cool, I hope it was a good deal. But I also try to educate people a little bit on what the difference is between a $400 or $500 training rapier and a $1,000 to $2,000 historical reproduction. And that's what we're going to look at today. So, what are the differences? Well, the biggest difference is that historical rapiers and our pieces are finished inside and out. All right, so modern HEMA pieces or collector pieces tend to be finished on the outside, but the inside is all just raw welds and unshaped joins. On our pieces, we do our best to make the inside just as nice as the outside and to finish all of the joins and welds in a way that looks like historical medieval welds. So what does that look like? Well, so I'm gonna set down this sword. This original rapier has a 3-tine inner guard, right? So if I'm holding it, these two rings go on the outside. This 3-tine guard protects the inside of my hand. You can see that these welds, right, are a forge weld that's pinched together and it's finished on the inside as well as the outside. And on this one, you can actually see that this piece of metal is a single piece and that this is two pieces that come together and are welded here. You can tell because this bottom piece is a thicker piece of metal, while these two thin ones come together. Now, this isn't just a 3-way split right here. Otherwise, this piece would be as big around as all three of these put together, which it isn't, right? So if you took that and split it into 3 pieces, it would look different. Instead, we have a single piece and then 2 other pieces coming down into this weld. So let's look at this sword. So this one that I just made has a 4-tine inner guard, right? So instead of the 3 that were on the one over there, this one has a 4th tine, which is just another design. But if you can see in there, right, the finish and the joins on all of these pieces look as similar as I can get to that original, which means that none of this is flat, right? It's not ground flat over a weld. Instead, it all has curves to it. There isn't a flat piece on the entire hilt, right? All of these different facets and different angles are hand done. You can see the way that this guard tapers through here, right? That's because we didn't just use a plain piece of stock and slap it in there, right? It's shaped the whole way around and the whole way through in the same way that the historical pieces are, right? See here, underneath. This takes 3 times as much time as making a sword that isn't finished inside, because the inside's harder to finish than the outside. Right? It's hard to get in there. but it's really important when you look at period pieces. Why? Because your rapier is spending most of its time being your jewelry at your hip, and people can see in it, right? The inside is at least as important to finish on a real rapier as the outside is, because you're wearing it. You're not just fighting with it. In fact, you fight with your rapier pretty infrequently if you want your life to be longer, than the next week. So that aesthetic is really important. Some other issues: building it to the hand so that there's not gigantic amounts of space around the grip, right? You need to be able to move all the ways that you should be able to, but the guard should be relatively tight to your hand. And most modern reproductions are too big. Now, sometimes that's because of laziness or ignorance on the part of the maker. Sometimes it's because people are using them as sporting equipment and they want to have a big glove in there, right? We are primarily not making sporting equipment. We're making fully functional reproductions of historical pieces, which means that ours are the right size, which means that you can actually carry out the techniques because you don't have a big bonzo basket in the way of what you're trying to do. So that's another important factor. Let me show you a different historical rapier. So this rapier, both of these rapiers are Italian. This one is also early 17th century, right? 1620, 1630, something like that. When you look at this piece, right, it looks more or less symmetrical initially, but it's not, right? So real pieces, and real medieval pieces in particular, are rarely symmetrical. Why? Because your body's not symmetrical, your hand's not symmetrical, right? So this one actually has 7 rings on the inside and 8 rings on the outside, which gives you more coverage on the outside of your hand where you need it than on the inside of your hand. And it eliminates the lowest and biggest ring, which would make it more difficult to wear if it were on your hip, right? So you can see all of these welds, all of these joins coming together here in an extremely Renaissance fashion, right? They're doing this. This hilt is iron, it's not steel, and iron is a bit easier to forge weld and pinch weld together than modern steel is. You could never do that with stainless steel. I couldn't, at least, right? So we try to make our welds look like the historical welds on these pieces and be finished in the same kind of way to the same kind of scale, right? So it's those details, the right size, the right kind of asymmetry, the lack of any actual flat surfaces, right? It's a key of modern machining today. It makes perfectly flat surfaces. There are no flat surfaces on this historical piece, none, right? So we don't make flat surfaces on ours. We hand do it in order to make it look and feel and function just like these originals. So I'm gonna go back and grab the sword I just made again, give you one last look at that. The final idea I want to share is aesthetic, right? It's about having a Renaissance aesthetic for these kinds of swords, or a medieval aesthetic for earlier swords. Swords have a comprehensive kind of theme to them, right? You tend, especially on ornate pieces like this, to have design features that are carried out throughout the piece. So on this one, it's the acanthus leaf decoration, which occurs several times in several places on the sword with these striations on the hilt that contribute to the aesthetic feel of it, right? This is a copy of an original. You have these little finials up here. Another thing, when you look at this, right, you can see that this rear quillin is canted outward about 3 or 4 degrees, a tiny amount. It doesn't stick straight up. You know why? Because none of the originals did. You know why? Because when you're holding this, it helps cover your arm to have it slightly curved. I can't say none of the originals did. Usually, they were asymmetrical and canted out on the sword for functional reasons. And these kinds of little details, right, that subtle curve to it, are some of the things that set our rapiers apart, and really all of our pieces apart from many competitors out there. So I just wanted to share that with you. Hope you guys found it interesting, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.